Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
You're watching Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Recent events have brought into sharp focus the nature of our parliamentary democracy and the roles of all its stakeholders. Elected representatives, that's our MPs and our ADUNs, have long been front and center of this system, with its strengths and weaknesses apparent to us all. But what happens when our elected representatives fail us? What happens when an elected representative chooses to switch allegiances or switch sides to a different party? Is our only recourse to wait till the next election to make our disappointment felt, or to hold them accountable for their actions? We're going to be discussing that over the next 30 minutes. Joining us on the show tonight, we have Thomas Fann. He's the chairperson for the Coalition for Clean and Fair Elections, or better known as Bersih 2.0. Good evening, Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight. Before we get into the very important topic of recall elections, of which I understand that on Monday, Bersih will be launching a campaign called Sack or Keep, and you will be holding a mock online recall election. But before we get into that topic, Thomas, I'd like to very quickly get your thoughts on the very recent events of the rulers' meeting and the statements that have been released following it. What has been Bersih's position and perspective on the ruler's statement? Actually, not just the ruler's statement, but also the Yang di-Pertuan Agong statement and then the collective Malay rulers' statement on the need to convene both parliament and respective state legislatures.
Thank you, Melisa and Sharaad, for having me on the show again. Yes, I think Bersih has been consistent from the very beginning when the emergency was declared and Parliament was suspended, that it shouldn't have been suspended. And we have been calling for the reopening of Parliament since then, and even suggested several ways whereby it can be open safely in terms of the health pandemic by doing it in a hybrid manner, or even opening it safely politically, because we believe that the concern and also the reason why the Prime Minister suspended Parliament using the emergency was that he didn't want to lose power by losing a confidence vote. So we suggested that the Prime Minister should speak to the opposition and have a confidence and supply agreement whereby they agree to support no confidence motion and also budget supply motions in exchange for certain reforms. Reforms like equal constituency fund, but more importantly is that reform to Parliament itself, that the MPs in Parliament are not just rubber stamp or just day visitors, but they actually function in select committees. I think this is a good time for the opposition to ask for this reform, because the government desperately need the support of everyone in the Parliament, but the country during a time of crisis need all hands on deck. We cannot afford to disable Parliament at such a crucial time. So Bersih welcomes the statement by the Yang di-Pertuan Agong and the rulers, and we urge the Prime Minister to quickly take heed and open Parliament right now.
But Thomas, if we look at some of the statements coming out of the executive, even as far back as February, when the Agong did in fact clarify, the palace clarified that Parliament could convene during this emergency, and yet the executive has taken the decision not to. And there seems to be a question of interpretation about the respective roles, either the palace or the executive vis-a-vis Parliament. Some of the rules, some of the disputes seem to be on whose prerogative is it to call for Parliament, and the position taken by the law minister seems to be that the executive has full control of that prerogative, and so they will do so under conditions they determine when they think it's right. I mean, what do you do in a situation where the executive claims that kind of power?
Well, we actually agree with the executive in the sense that I think it's quite clear that the constitutions requires the prime minister to advise the king, and then the king can then act, can convene parliament. All right, and I think that is still our position. Uh, and but the king, the king does have some residual authority in the sense that I think he can, for example, call the MPs together to get their views, to get their numbers. Um, but what we are risking right now is that we are risking going into a constitutional crisis. I think the rulers have spoken more than once. And this time, I think it's a very clear sign where it's not just the Agong, but all the rulers came out with a joint statement calling for the reconvening of parliament. I think if the prime minister still or the executive continues to ignore that, it may force His Majesty to take the unthinkable step of coming into and really, in a way, forcing the Parliament to be open, and we'll be going into uncharted waters if that is the
Right.
case. And so we urge the Prime Minister, the executive, don't do this to the King. All right. I think we need to respect the wishes of the His Majesties and also the members of Parliament themselves who has been calling for the reopening of Parliament.
Yeah, clearly this is still a developing political event, and I think we'll have to keep a close eye on next steps and responses coming up from the current administration. But Thomas, let's come back to the conversation at hand, which is the launch of this Sack or Keep campaign. It's very interesting because Bersih puts forth the approach of recall elections as a way to address party hopping. One of the things that it wants to address is party hopping, and I'm just wondering. Let's talk a little bit about that issue. Whether there is a consensus that party hopping is in fact a problem, and how do we look at the practice of party hopping as part of the wider political culture?
Well, I think by now there should be a national consensus that party hopping is very, very bad. I think what happened at the Sheraton move a year over now really opened up Pandora's box, whereby party hopping is not a new phenomenon. It has been part of us, but you get a little bit of hopping here and popping there, but nothing dramatic like the collapse of the government. But what we saw was the collapse of one federal government, and subsequently, very in quick succession, the collapse of six state government. And the bad news is that this is going to be the new norm in politics. If we don't do anything to deter this sort of defection. So when the Sheraton move took place, per se, basically we sat back. I mean, like everyone else, in a bit of a shock, but we sat back and look at, say, what went wrong? What was the weakness in our political system? And one of the problems is that there is absolutely no prohibition and no deterrence to MP switching allegiance. And that's where, when we studied the two options, anti-party hopping law or recall election, we went with recall election. And so we have been doing research, and now we are ready basically to bring it to the public and get public support for recall election.
Thomas, if I can ask you, if you can, even though you didn't choose anti-hopping law, could you explain to us why anti-hopping laws are a problem, especially with respect to freedom of association and parliamentary conventions in most British-style parliamentary democracies? Why is an anti-hopping law, in some sense, problematic?
Yeah, as you mentioned, one of the problem is, first of all, the constitutional problem, Article 10 on the freedom of association. And I think this is a really tried case law where the federal court, the highest court, has already found that it will be in violation of this federal constitution on freedom. But the other thing that we considered is that, first of all, when you have anti-hopping law, as we know, party leaders are really very powerful in their position. They select who will be the candidates for election, things like that. But when you have anti-hopping law, what that means is that if the party leader does not like you as an MP because you refuse to follow his guidance or rulings, he can sack you midterm and then trigger an automatic by-election for that constituency. Now, the consequence or unintended consequence of that is that all the elected MPs will be rubber stamps, basically. They will not be able to vote on their own conscience. And also, we need to be reminded that not all party hoppings are bad, because I think one of the famous one was Tan Sri Sharaad Samad when he was a much younger man in Johor Bahru. He had a disagreement with the Prime Minister then, Mahathir, and out of principle, he resigned from his party and resigned the seat of Johor Bahru and ran as an independent. And you know what? The people of Johor Bahru endorsed him as an independent to defeat UMNO. So, but of course, that loophole has been closed after that. Mahathir changed the law that if you resign, you cannot run for 5 more years. So that's in the constitution. So we need to have a system where it does not punish the good frogs. So to say, not all frogs are bad. So whereas recall election is, it is up to you, the voters, to decide whether you endorse or reject the decision made by your MP. So we feel that this is a much better way to deal with this problem. It's a deterrence.
Okay, all right, Thomas, we're going to take a quick break, but after this, let's continue this conversation. We'll take a closer look at how recall elections can work. Stay tuned to Consider This. Thanks so much for staying with Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. With me is Sharaad Kuttan. Let's continue our conversation with Thomas Fann, chairperson of Bersih 2.0. This coming Monday, Bersih will be launching a campaign called Sack or Keep, which will include a mock online recall election. Thomas, how I understand it is that, during elections, we pick the elected representatives, we kind of hire them. And recall elections, in my mind, is like our opportunity to fire them when they're not performing. I hope I've got that correct. But I do want to ask you if you can help us visualize or conceptualize what recall elections can look like in Malaysia.
So what Bersih has done is that we did a study, globally of the different models for recall election. And but more importantly is that we spoke to local politicians on their views for such a law. And through those consultation, we actually learned a lot about what is good for our country. So our recommendation for Malaysia for recall election is that we follow quite closely the Taiwan model. That if somebody, the constituents in that constituency want to recall an MP, there are three criteria or three grounds that must be triggered. No other reasons will qualify. The number one is that due to defection, they defect from their party, become independent, or defect from their party to join another coalition, or the coalition, the party itself, move to another coalition, as what happened during Sheraton move. Then that particular seat become eligible for recall election. Second reason is that if the MP get convicted of a compoundable offense, but the compound fine was less than 2,000, If it's more than 2,000, current laws will take care of it, and he will be disqualified. But a lot of time, judges just fine you 1,999, so that you don't get disqualified. But the voters may take a different view and think that that offense is serious enough, and so a recall can be triggered. And thirdly, is of course, if you are absent from Parliament for 80% of the days in a year of a sitting, then your voters would have the right to recall you. So that's our recommendation. And our threshold for Malaysia also is that it takes 1% to trigger to start a official recall. So once you get 1% registered voter in your constituency, you contact the election commission, then they will give you uh, uh, a period of 2 months to collect another 10%. So once you are able to collect 10% of registered voter, then the EC will then start a recall election where voters of that constituency can vote yes or no. In other words, the MP have a chance to defend himself. He can campaign to stay and say, I don't want to be removed. Keep me, you know. So
Thomas, yeah, so to interrupt you, but could you help us understand in terms of the comparisons between different models of recall? Is the Taiwan model, does it have a low threshold? Is it the easiest to do, or is it the hardest? In terms of the range of ease to do a recall, where does Taiwan sit?
Uh, it is not low. It is not low. So it would really take a popular move to remove a sitting elected representative. They like what we are recommending, which is quite close to Taiwan. We are saying that you have to collect more than 50% of the registered voter to be removed. In other words, majority of registered voter in your constituency agrees that you have to be removed, then you'll be removed. Or if you won your last election with say 33% of the vote, which is possible, then if 33% plus one vote more than what you got the last time, then you're removed. So that is basically our recommendation, which quite closely mirrors the Taiwan one. Not easy.
You mentioned a little bit just now about some of the unintended consequences of anti-hopping laws, some of the disadvantages of anti-hopping laws. I'm wondering, with recall elections, are there disadvantages that you see in having recall elections? Could there be unintended consequences of this?
Yes. I think one of the big concern and the feedback that we got from active politicians is this, that if you have recall election, then your opponent who maybe lost to you by 1 percentage point would always be looking for ways, to trigger. So that is where one way is that we limit the grounds for triggering. Secondly is adjusting the threshold so that it is not too easy. Too easy means that you are going to have constant by-election, and that is going to exhaust the country, exhaust the voters themselves. So it's a matter of tweaking these two things, the grounds and the threshold, so to minimize the abuse. Now, maybe the first time we may not get it right if we have such a law, but from experience, that's where we can tweak until we get it right. Now, most countries,
Right.
about 17 countries have such kind of regulations.
Okay, perhaps something we can look into. I wanted to ask you, Thomas, because part of this campaign is about raising public awareness on recall elections, but based, maybe on anecdotal observations or anecdotal evidence, I've observed perhaps a growing apathy when it comes to Malaysian voters because they see that their ballot seems to have less relevance as to what's happening with the political scenario, the wider political scenario. So how are you going to encourage public support for recall elections, particularly at a time when people's minds are on dealing with the economic fallout from the pandemic and a growing apathy towards politics?
Yeah, precisely. I think we are under no illusion that it would be easy, especially during this time. The furthest thing from people's mind right now is reform. How to improve election, even taking part in it. But at the same time, the very reason why we are introducing recall election is because we do not want people to lose hope. We want to let them know that there are mechanisms, there are way, there are laws that we can demand that actually restore power to the voter. Now, right now, I mean, as a voter, we are helpless. We can just watch the frogs jump left, jump right, and there's nothing we can do. But recall election is a reform that will give people hope. So, in order to make it really easy with this mock recall or simulated recall election, we are doing it online. We built a e-voting system with our technology partner, Rigoff Technologies, that is robust, good enough to be used for real election, so that people can actually take part in the mock recall in the comfort of their home. All right. So we hope that with that, and also adjusting the threshold to make it more easy, we hope that there will be participation in this because we really need the public on our side before the politician would do their part.
Thomas, of course, I can hear, people saying, well, this is all rather academic. Most politicians, even progressive ones who come to power based on a particular system, are unlikely to want to alter that system because, well, it produced the results they wanted, which is their victory. But you put that aside, I'm very interested, in this game that you're going to be playing with Malaysians on Monday. I mean, how exactly do people participate? What exactly is going to happen on Monday and how can people join in?
Okay, so on Monday the 21st is we're gonna have the official launch from Brunei, and we're gonna have Tan Sri Muhammad Arif, the former Speaker of Parliament, doing the officiating at the launch, and we have invited various representatives from the political parties, and we're inviting SPR themselves to witness the launch. Now, after the launch, information will be given out, whereby if your constituency, say Gomba, Ampang, Tebrau, Kuala Langat, or one of this, saw a defection, and you say, I want to take part in this, we say, if you are part of a registered organization in that constituency, or you are a political party in that constituency, contact us. And once we approve your application, then you collect 3% of registered voter. So our system has already downloaded the electoral roll. So only voters in that constituency can take part. But then online, how do you verify? This is where the coolest part come in. Our system recognize you facially live online. It's not 24-hour later you can vote. So you upload your IC, you take a selfie, and then the system instantly check the face on the IC and your face. If you pass, you go and then you can cast your vote. So that is, I think, the first in Malaysia. It is a really cool system that we are going to be using.
So just to clarify, so this facial recognition that links up to the e-voting system, that is something that can be fully adopted by the Election Commission. I understand that the SPI right now, or Election Commission, has a facial recognition system, but it's not automated, right? It's a manual process, isn't it? Someone has to verify that.
Right.
Somebody has to verify that the face matches the picture on the IC.
Yeah.
So is this? Sorry, you say?
So it sounds alike, in the sense that you upload your IC and also a selfie. But then the next day, the officer will take a look at the two image and make a decision. If things you look alike, then they allow you to register as a voter. No, ours is done by AI. artificial intelligence.
So is
I
this
guess
something that Bersih, sorry, is this something that Bersih might be putting forth to the EC to adopt in the next general elections?
Well,
We are
Melissa, I
hoping.
think you're right. Melissa, it doesn't seem that we've ever had a problem with technology. We only had a problem with political will, right, Thomas?
Yeah, that is a different animal. I mean, technology, we can do it, we can correct it. But political will is a different thing. But I'm personally quite hopeful even in that front. On that front.
All right, Thomas, we wish you all the best of luck with the launch of this campaign, and we'll keep a close eye on the developments of potential for recall elections in Malaysia. Thank you for joining us on the show tonight.
Thank you
That was
very
our
much.
conversation. That was our conversation with Thomas Fann of Bersih 2.0, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. Thank you so much for watching the show tonight. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
We'll be back with you same time on Monday. Till then, good night.